2 minutes after 10, I think that should be enough. Good morning, everybody. I'm Rob Sword from Robart Electrical Services. Thank you for coming out and joining with me today. I've got this topic that I want to let everybody know about. It's something that the city started a little while ago, and I understand why they do it. I don't approve of it, but I understand why. First of all, let me ask, are the majority of you realtors, or are there homeowners in here also? Any homeowners out there?
I am one.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. I'll keep it general, not specific. That way everybody will get full benefit out of it. But let's get started. Electric cars, hot tubs, and load calculations. HIP and tricks with city requirements. A HIP is something new that the city came out with about 1.5 years ago. A HIP is for a hot tub. And what it is, it's a home improvement permit. Normally what they had was homeowners permits, builders permits, development permits. But then about 1.5 years ago, they created the HIP, the home improvement permit. What this is for this isn't for new construction, obviously. This is for things like hot tubs and such, where you're just adding to the existing. A home improvement permit is something that you take out and apply for the addition, in this case, specifically for a hot tub. When you apply for a HIP, when it's accepted, you have to take out an electrical permit at that time. When you take out the HIP, you prepay for the electrical permit, and you actually assign an electrical contractor that's going to be working with you on the project. So they're trying to keep things really organized and documented so that they know exactly what's going on. This is for the hot tub only. Let's move forward. Hot tub demands on service. Tubs are rated. Now, a hot tub, I've seen in my industry that there's anywhere from a regular plug-in for some of these inflatable water containers that they call hot tubs. And then you can go up to 50 and 60 amps, 240 volt for the bigger hot tubs. Now, a hot tub can take a lot of power. The 60 amp hot tubs, 60 amp rated, take about 50 amp, and that's what's applied to the demand on your house. So let's start talking about that. When you take out a HIP for a hot tub, the city of Edmonton requires you do a load calculation. Now, this is also for a car charger. Hot tubs and car chargers are new, where they demand a load calculation. A load calculation is something done by a master electrician, and what it's for is to document how much demand you're putting on your electrical service. Now what it does is it determines, like it says here, how much demand you're putting on the electrical service for a hot tub and car charger done by a master electrician. What you want to do is you want to ensure that you do not exceed the rating of your service. Now, let me tell you what that means. If you've got 100 amp electrical service, and in your home, you can tell if it's 100 or not by looking at the end of the handle on the main breaker. That's that breaker that's on the very top of the panel above all the rest. It's a double breaker, and on the end of the handle, it'll have the number. Normally, if you've got a house after 1965, it's going to be 100 amp. Today, a lot of places, a lot of builders are putting in 200 amp and so forth, but the typical one you're going to find is 100. What the load calculation does is it determines how much demand you're putting onto this service, and it will, did I do something wrong?
Nope.
Good. And it will tell the city if you've exceeded your service. Now, this is taken out by a master electrician, And there's usually a fee for this, for the calculations and so forth, because when we put our name at the bottom with our master electrician number, that means we're taking responsibility. Now, what happens if you exceed the 100 amp electrical service? There are ways to beat the system. Let me give you an example. An electric range does approximately 25 amps. Well, no, it doesn't approximately. It's exactly 25 amps that it adds to an electrical service. So now think about this. If you've got a 100 amp service and your stove by itself takes 25 amps, that all adds into the end result. One way of overcoming this and reducing your demand is to install a gas range. You've now removed 25 amps from the load calculation. These are in the cases, ladies and gentlemen, where you've exceeded your service and you've got to start looking at ways of reducing it to be able to get your permits and so forth from the city. 25 amps off 100 amp service reduces it by 25%. Air conditioners are another big one that are calculated at 100%. And you can look on your nameplate data for the amperage of the air conditioner. But as a rule of thumb, amperages are usually 20 to 30 amps towards the demand on the load calculation. So again, if you've exceeded 100 amps in your load calculation and you're trying to reduce, air conditioners are one of the things that put demand on the system. Residential car chargers. Here is the big one because it can be a large part of the total demand. Let me tell you how this works. Car chargers are anywhere from 15 amps to 90 amp 240 volt. Car chargers are added to a load calculation at 100%. What that means is, well, just to give you an example, we did a 12,000 square foot house north of St. Albert, and this gentleman had two garages in the front. He put in two 90 amp Tesla car chargers, one in each garage. The total service size for this residential house was 400 amps. So all of these things are taken into calculation when you're looking at figuring out how much power to bring into a house. The shorter the charging time for those who have electric cars or looking at it, the higher the power consumption because there's more power being put to the batteries. Okay, so now these are the three biggest usually items that are calculated into the demands. The car chargers, air conditioning, ranges. Another one that's big is a dryer. A dryer will add about 20 amps to a load calculation. On the bigger houses with steam generators for showers, those are big to add to the load calculation. But the whole intent of this thing that we're talking about today is the fact that the city of Edmonton now requires load calculations for hot tubs and electric car chargers. Electric car chargers, they're an average of about 30 amps. We're putting in a lot of them, a lot of car chargers and so forth. And we're finding the car chargers demands are 30, 40 amp is pretty typical. 50, you're getting into the bigger car chargers for the faster charging time. But 30 is pretty typical. And again, car chargers are taken at 100% towards the load calculation. Got a question?
What is the typical cost of an electrician to do a load?
Oh, load calculation, usually about $150. We come out and gather all the information required, do the load calculation. We submit it to the city with our signature and our master's number. We are taking responsibility for the information on that sheet. Okay. New Edmonton requirements. Now let's take a look at this. All electrical work requires an electrical permit. Whether it's an air conditioner, electric car charger, whatever, because that's one of the requirements from Service Alberta, that any new installation of electrical wiring and such requires an electrical permit. Now, I want to bring something up to you just as a passing note. Air conditioners are historically famous for being put in without an electrical permit. But I want you all to know something that was told to me. If electrical work is done and there is no electrical permit taken out, and heaven forbid there should be an electrical fire, if it's determined that the fire was caused by an electrical permit, then the insurance companies are telling us that they now have the right to void your insurance.
If the fire was caused.
Sorry, if the fire was caused, thanks, Lenka. If the fire was caused by an electrical short circuit or whatever, and it was found that you did electrical work without a permit, they have the right, they say, to cancel your insurance. So an electrical permit isn't that big of a deal. It's very, very important to have. Next item, all hot tubs require a HIP, including an electrical permit. The HIP, of course, is your home improvement permit. What they do is they want you to submit for a hot tub, a drawing of your yard, where you're going to be placing the hot tub. Are there any power lines going over? Are there any fences close by? Those sort of things. They look at it, they stamp it, they approve it, they give you an electrical permit, you assign the electrical contractor. All electrical vehicle chargers require an electrical permit, unless you're plugging them into a standard 120 volt electrical outlet, of course. But if you're putting in any new wiring and receptacles and so forth to plug in your car chargers, they all require an electrical permit.
There's a couple of questions.
Oh, let's take a look at the questions.
You mentioned gas stoves.
Oh yeah, gas stoves. What if I have a gas stove oven common? Is there still a large draw? No. For a gas stove, it's the regular draw of 120 volt outlet for the controls and the digital readout and that sort of thing. There is no draw.
Okay, someone lists the amp load added by outdoor hot tub.
Oh, outdoor hot tub depends, but a normal standard hot tub is anywhere from 30 to 40 amp draw on a 50 to 60 amp rated hot tub, because we only go to 80%. And that 30 to 40 amps is what's used to put onto the load calculation to determine if you're exceeding your electrical service coming into the house.
Would installing a battery bank for the car charger help reduce the load?
Yes. Now, the city, the battery bank from solar, Robart Electric does lots and lots of solar. Work with two companies. When they install the battery bank and such, that is used to feed the electrical systems of the house. Now, a 30 or 40 amp load is huge when you're looking at solar. So yes, if you can show that the hot tub or whatever, was it a hot tub, reduce the load? Yes, car charger. If you can show that the car charger is only being fed by that battery bank, then 0 amperage goes on to the load calculation. Okay, it's only what's connected to the incoming power from the city or utilities.
Does an installation of a load balancer allow for an alteration to the calculation?
Yes, a load balancer, we're going to talk about that coming up right away. There's a couple different of them out there. Couple more things. All tubs and electric vehicle chargers require a load calculation in the city of Edmonton. Yes. And Fort Saskatchewan, Sherwood Park, Spruce Grove, Stony Plain, they usually follow pretty closely to Edmonton. So if it's found that they do not require it right now, they will probably need it in the next couple months. They pretty well do whatever Edmonton does. Load calculations are created by a master electrician only. And if you submit one on your own, it is not acceptable to the city because they need somebody that they can point the finger at and make responsible. That's why at the bottom of the load calculation, we have our master's number and our signature. The load calculation must not exceed the home's service capacity. And again, for those who came late, the amperage of your electrical service is determined by taking a look at the end of the handle on your main electrical panel. If you've got 2 or 3 electrical panels, it's the electrical panel closest to your meter is your main electrical panel.
Someone just mentioned the battery bank for the car chargers would cost thousands extra.
Yes, it would.
Mhm.
The battery banks are very, very expensive, especially at that load, because the demand is like a stove. Turn on your stove and leave it on. It wouldn't take long to drain batteries. They don't have that kind of capabilities. But to answer the question, yes, if it can be shown that it's only feeding the car charger, then there is no load added to the load calculation.
Chris is asking, does the load calculation created by a master electrician apply to a homeowner's permit as well?
Load calculation apply to a homeowner's permit. In order to get the permit for a car charger or a hot tub, there must be a load calculation done and presented to the city before they will give you the electrical permit. So yes, it is applied to it. You're welcome. Okay, last one. Load calculation must not exceed the home service capability. We're going to do a couple more and talk about a few more things, guys. In conclusion, in an older home, pre-70s, usually about 65, 66, there used to be a 60 amp electrical service. Now, when I mentioned about taking a look at the end of the handle on your main breaker, a lot of the panels, the main panels, pre-1965 did not have main breakers. Those were typically 60 and 70 amp rated electrical services. A 60 amp service is not capable of handling an electric vehicle car charger or a hot tub, because right now, with the size of the house, with a stove, a dryer, you're probably running about 45 amps for the load calculation. So by putting on something like a hot tub or a car charger, you've exceeded it and it ain't gonna do it. So your older homes, for those lucky enough living in older homes, take a look at your electrical service and you might want to consider bumping it up to 100 or in a lot of cases, 200 amps. Now let's talk about 200 amp services. I'm going to start giving you some numbers. Pre-1965, a typical overhead electrical service in the older areas usually will cost you somewhere between $3,000 and $4,000 complete, turnkey with permits. That's the typical average service. If you've got an underground service, and that's item number 2, underground service to 200 amps will be somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000. Now let me explain why. When your house was built with a 100 amp service, the size of wire and so forth was put underground. If you want to upgrade to 200, that underground wire has to be upgraded to a different size to accommodate the extra amperage. So now let me tell you what the city says. If you call EPCOR and say to EPCOR, guys, I want to go from 100 to 200 amps. My house was built in 1985. The very first thing they're going to tell you is consider $20,000 for the city cost of upgrading to 200 amps. What that includes,
It's crazy.
it is crazy, because it never used to be. They used to say 12,000. Now they're saying 20. I don't think they want you to do it, but they haven't got a choice nowadays, especially with the car chargers. But what they're talking about is this will get you the wire from the service point, which is a transformer, a light pedestal out in front of the houses, those sort of things. It'll get you an underground wire to the property line. No, hang on. Let me back up. Let me rephrase that. What that is for them to do their work and so forth. Let me back up and tell you what your responsibility is. If you want to go from 100 to 200, your electrical panel has to be changed. What's called the meter socket. that metal box that's on the wall that the glass meter plugs into. That now has to be upgraded to a 200 amp. You are responsible for trenching from your meter out to your property line. That's your responsibility. The last item that you are responsible for is to supply all of the wire underground from the panel underground to the point of termination. Here is where the city comes into play. They will tell you consider 20,000 as probably a maximum. You apply or you appoint an electrical contractor like Robart Electric to come in. You get us to apply for a 200 amp service. What the city does is they send out the construction people, the engineers take a look at everything, and they give you an estimate as to what it's going to take to upgrade your 100 amp, 200 amp. The last item that you are responsible for that you must consider is you've got to pay for the wire that goes from the panel to your property line, and the city tells you to leave X number of meters coiled up underground to get to their distribution point. So now I've seen it where a homeowner wants to put in 200 amps. The city comes back and says, at the property line, you must leave us an additional 70 or 80 meters of wire. The cost to you for your portion, it could be $10,000, could be $15,000. It's absolutely ridiculous. And the city's going to give you a calculation as to what their portion is going to cost you. So a 200 amp service, if you're building a new house, never, in my opinion, put in a 100 amp service. It's just not worth it. Put in the extra 200, extra money for the 200 amp and have that put in. It's probably going to cost you probably less than $2,000 extra when you're building a new house to go from 100 to 200 amps. Okay. There are tricks that we can use to reduce the demand. Let's talk about those tricks. Oops.
Also, hold on.
Yeah.
Bram was wanting to know if the Calgary is same for permits, etc.
You know what? Robart Electric has been in business for 38 years. I've been operating in and around Edmonton. I haven't checked into Calgary, but you know, with these podcasts and that sort of stuff, you're the first person that asked that question. It might be an idea for me to contact some electrical contractors and find out if they are different than Edmonton. I know there are a couple different things that they do that we don't, but to answer that question, I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure that they've got something similar in place. Okay, let's talk about reducing the demand for the hot tub and so forth. There's a thing called a load miser, or to reduce the amount of current you're drawing on the main service. Now, let me give you an example. Let's say you call Robart Electric and we do a load calculation for the $150, and it comes out that you've got 115 amp demand on the 100 amp electrical service. Now, in order to get your permits and so forth from the city, you've got to show that you've reduced that 115 or 120 amps below the 100 amps that's being sent to your house. These WAP Misers are a device that we can purchase to put on the wall beside your electrical panel. What it does is you take two loads. You take, for instance, your dryer and your stove. These two loads go into the WAP Miser, and this WAP Miser controls them, so only one of the two devices can be used at the same time. So if you've got your stove running, your dryer cannot be used. If your dryer is running, your stove cannot be used. What this has done is it says to the city, one of these two items, and it's the lesser of the two, where in this case, it would be the 20 amps for the dryer, is taken out of the equation because it can't be on when the stove's on. So now your load calculation comes in 115, 120 amps, less the 20 amps for the dryer. So now that puts you under the 100 amp coming into your house. That's what those sort of devices do. And we put in lots of those. Somebody's going to ask the question, no, haven't yet. What are those things worth? They're about $1,800 supplied and installed to control the power consumption. Okay, guys. Another thing, like I said earlier, is to go with gas instead of electricity, because then there's no load on the demand.
I live in Calgary. It'd be good to know how things go here as well. Yeah.
You know what? Give me a couple of days to look into that. You've got my email address. Send me an email, and I'll check into that for you, Brom, and find out if that's the case. I'm almost positive it should be, but let me verify that for sure and find out. But just send me an email. You can send it to rob@robartelectric.com. ROBART, robartelectric.com.
Do you have a recommended brand for a load miser?
There are a couple of them out there. The one that I prefer is made by a company called Dandy, D-A-N-D-Y. They're in Wetaskiwin, big manufacturing outfit out there. They're all CSA approved and so forth. You can get a hold of them. If you're a contractor, they will sell them to you. Otherwise, you can go to Ewell, EWEL in town is the electrical the electrical supplier that carries Danby. But you can't buy them from Wetaskiwin, but that's where they're located. All right, let's move on a little bit. For the realtors, I just want to recap on something. For the last 12 years, I personally have been going and working with realtors and home inspectors to help you guys out when it comes to dealing with different things, selling and buying houses. There's always electrical issues that come up. The biggest one, of course, is a 60 amp electrical service. Nowadays, the insurance companies have decided they're not accepting a 60 amp electrical service. They only want 100 amp. 60 amp electrical services were put in exclusively up until about 1965. Now you can go to robartelectric.com. There's a thing called the library. You can go into there and find out exactly how to identify if it's a 60 or 100 amp service. But for the realtors out there, the things that we've created to help you guys out are FaceTime quotes. This has been an incredibly wonderful tool for realtors to use, because what we do is while you're there with the home inspector, if you've been one of the ones who have been trained or your home inspector has been trained and the question comes up, is this a 60 amp service? If you guys determine yes, and you need a quote, contact me. Tell me that in 15, 20 minutes, you want to do a FaceTime. Let's look at the situation and you need a quotation. That gives me time to pull off the road if I'm on the hen day or whatever the case may be. Let's do FaceTime. You show me what's existing at this property. I go to my laptop computer and we do a quote.
Another question. Instead of doing a new 200 amp service, can you do 100 amp plus 100 amp second panel and wire coming into the house?
Underground, no, because you can't put in the second wire. Sorry, if you didn't hear that, it said, instead of doing a 200 amp service, can you do 100 plus 100 second panel and wire incoming into the house? Now, if you put up a second 100 amp panel, that doesn't mean you've changed the capability of the power coming into the house. All that means is you've got more room to add breakers. What needs to be upgraded is the electrical conductor underground going to the city supply, or in pre-1968, 65, it's the overhead lines going from the house to the alley. Those are the wires that need to be upgraded. And the meter socket, the thing that the glass meter plugs into, and the electrical panel. Those are the things that need to be upgraded. So you can't just put up another 100 amp panel and have 200 amps. Okay.
What is the amp load added by an air conditioning unit?
What is the amp load added by an air conditioning unit? Air conditioners on a load calculation are taken at 100%. So an air conditioner, if you look on the nameplate data, it says minimum circuit capacity. That is the size of wire feeding the air conditioner. And it says maximum fuse or circuit breaker. This is a bit deceiving because if it says on the nameplate data, minimum circuit capacity is 19, but the breaker size will be 30. The reason for that is with an air conditioner, it has a compressor. That compressor gets charged and it's under load. So when the air conditioner turns off and tries to restart, it has to overcome the load of the compressor. And it's going to take probably 300% of the rated current at the initial startup for about 2 or 3 seconds. What this means is if you've got a 20 amp air conditioner, it could take up to 60 amps for 3 seconds when it starts. The reason for the 30 amp breaker on a 20 amp air conditioner is to prevent what's called nuisance tripping. Because when that air conditioner tries to start on a full compressor and draws that kind of current, a 20 amp breaker on a 20 amp air conditioner would trip. But a 30 amp, they're designed to give you that 3 second inrush current. That's why.
How's the class going?
Sorry, what was that?
Oh,
Chris has a question. I've seen another item that is similar to the WAP miser. You see that one?
Yeah,
Oh, by the way, I just realized I haven't heard back from Susan Cook.
guys, can you please turn off your microphones?
oh,
We're getting all your conversations. Okay, Chris sent in another one. I've seen another item is similar to the load miser where you can, with a current sensor on a 100 amp main. It will only allow EV charging when the total load on the demand is 80%. Have you seen those and what are your thoughts? It makes sense. It's a sensing device, sensing the current. It would be a clip-on CT ring that will go around the wire and it would determine if the load is down. Now, the only thing is, Chris, you're saying if the main is less than 80%, if it's rated for 100 and it's taking 79% or 79 amps, which is less than 80%, and a 40 amp car charger needs to start, well, that doesn't work. That doesn't make sense. So I haven't looked into these. I have heard about CTs sensing the loading on a panel, but for different purposes. I can't see how it could legally work for a car charger. Does that kind of answer your question? Bram, can you get a soft starter for the AC, like on a boat for that spike? No, they don't make soft starters. That's a resistive load that's put in the line to go through different steps to prevent that inrush current, but I've never seen that available for air conditioners. This is why the system is designed at the factory to give you the maximum fuse and circuit breaker size to protect the reduced current size. Says Chris, yes, it does. Thanks. All right. Guys, let's talk a little bit more for the realtors. Quick quotes, like I say, quick quotes are the most incredible things going. I used to do quotes for you 10, 12 years ago where you would call me up, give me the address. I'd go down, get all my measurements and so forth, go home, do the quote, send it off to you. I did get it done a lot of times in as little as 24 hours. But now with the FaceTime, I've generated quotes to your phone in as little as 8 minutes. So it's a huge, huge game changer, especially for the realtors to get rid of those speed bumps. Send in the pictures for a quote. If you can't do FaceTime on site when you're there doing the inspection with the home inspector, you can call me up. I can tell you which pictures I need you to take for me, and I can do a pretty close quote for that. It might not be 8 minutes, but it would be a lot better. Inspector PDF. If you got the inspector there and you're with the buyers and the inspector finds double tapping, he found hot wires hanging out of the wall, things like this. what we've been doing over the years for all you realtors is send me the PDF from the inspector. I'll go through it and I'll create a scope of work based on his findings and give you a quotation so that the buyer can now go to the seller with your negotiations and get some money back to get those things fixed. Letter for the buyer's insurance and mortgage. This one I did about 10 years ago, and this is incredible. What this is summer's coming. So if Robart Electric does a quotation for a service upgrade and sends it to you, the buyer or the seller needs to accept the quote by replying to the email and say, Rob, I accept the quote. Please proceed with the project. This to me is just like a signature. Now, what happens is when a buyer finds a 60 amp service and they go ahead, they do their negotiations, they find out that they want the house, everything is done. They now have their waiting time between purchasing and taking possession. Sometimes that's in as little as 30 days for a quick turnover. Now, let me tell you what this insurance and mortgage thing is. In the summer, EPCOR is booking probably 3, 4, 5 weeks in advance, 6 weeks sometimes, to get the service upgrade done. So if your buyer is taking possession prior to getting this done, the insurance company will not give them insurance unless the 60 amp service is done. Or if you go to the right insurance company, they will give you interim insurance for a term of maybe 60 days to get it done. Or some insurance companies are just saying, absolutely not. We're not going to give you insurance till it's done. But here's the trick. If you come across an insurance company that says, I'm not going to give you insurance until it's done, do you know that the mortgage broker cannot give your buyers a mortgage because the house is not insurable? This was a really cool thing I found out years and years and years ago. So we came up with a way of fixing that. If your buyer or seller accepts the quotation and it's going to be a turnover prior to getting it done, Robart Electric generates a letter for your buyer or seller that they give to the insurance company and the mortgage broker. What this letter says is Robart Electric and the master electrician, Rob Swerd, have entered into a contractual agreement for the upgrading of the electrical service at the aforementioned address. This service will be upgraded on this date as per EPCOR's scheduling. You take this piece of paper, you give it to the insurance company, you give it to the mortgage broker. I am now responsible to make sure that that gets done, and they're going to hold me to it. They will now give you insurance, and the mortgage broker can now give your client a mortgage because the insurance company can insure it. Nice and easy. But that was something we came up against about 10 years ago, and we fixed that problem. Couple more items. 24-hour almost support. I answer my phone about 23 and a half hours a day. So if you call me looking for advice, for consultation, all that sort of stuff, and I don't answer my phone, that's my half an hour. Call back half an hour later. Anyway, I try and answer my phone. I deal with a lot of realtors on Saturday night at 10 o'clock, Sunday morning, because they're out with their clients and questions come up. I'm always there for you guys. We got another
Jim's
question.
asking, houses are selling now with no conditions. Would you recommend getting an inspection done after?
Which one are you talking? Are you talking about?
Jim's houses are selling now with no conditions.
Oh, with no conditions,
Mhm.
no home inspections. Would you recommend getting an inspection done after they bought the house? Yes, absolutely. Robart Electric for $325 will come out and do a complete inspection on the electrical side of a home. If you choose to buy the property without a home inspection, I believe this is absolutely imperative. If I was buying, I would definitely get one done. What you're going to find out is it a 60 amp service, older than 1965? Is it aluminum wiring, 1968 to 1965? Is it knob and tube wiring? Something that insurance companies are not giving insurance for. That is from the 30s, 20s, and 40s. Other things like basements that were done without permits. That's the last item on the list. But that's something that you're going to find out if Robart Electric comes in and does these inspections for you. Smoke alarms are huge. The Alberta government now says building code says, and you guys all know this, I'm sure, nowadays to meet requirements on new construction, you need a smoke alarm in each bedroom. You need a smoke CO detector adjacent to the sleeping quarters, which means within 15 feet of the door of the bedrooms. You also need one on each level. All of these must be what's called interconnected and hardwired to 120 volt. These are things that we determine when Robart Electric comes in and do these inspections regarding the electrical of a home. Yes, it's absolutely imperative. Basement safety inspections, no. Okay, let's just move on. Okay, I'm going to tell you guys something I found out the other day. And that's that when you have an air conditioner installed in a home, the inspector coming into your home has the right to fail that installation, and regardless of everything is up to code. We're going to be doing another podcast in 3 to 4 weeks, maybe. Give you guys some notice on that. And it's going to tell you why. This blew me away. I could not believe what they were doing. But this is something that all homeowners and all realtors need to know. Okay, that's coming up on the next podcast. Finally, if there's no more questions, guys, if you think of something later, email me, rob@robartelectric.com. And we've come to the end of our presentation. There's the email address. There's the website, robartelectric.com. We have a thing on robartelectric.com called the library. One thing I'm going to talk to you about briefly, the library was created because realtors were complaining that they have a client that starts asking questions. They found aluminum wiring. Now what do I do? The realtor is not an electrician. You guys should not have to answer those kind of questions. So what Robart Electric did was we created the library. Now you have the right and the ability to say to your client, hold it, chikai, go to robartelectric.com, click on the library, go in and read all about service upgrades, aluminum wiring, why is it dangerous, what you need to do, and so forth. You are now removing the liability of you answering these questions. It's a fabulous thing just to cover your butt. We got, any comment about solar panel installation? Cost, benefit, watch outs, limitations. You know what? We're putting in a lot of them now. And the city of Edmonton and those guys all had money that they were giving away for solar. There's a lot of people completely going solar, and it's quite the expense. But from my aspect of it, I have not needed to delve into the capabilities and all that stuff because it wasn't necessary. But we look after all the electrical conversions, because nowadays, when you put in solar, the solar companies are coming back and they've got a calculation that they must do because they're taking out permits also. So they're coming back to us and saying, Rob, Susan needs you to contact her because we've got to upgrade the electrical service to put in solar. What we're normally doing is putting in larger electrical panels, a 100 amp service with 100 amp coming in, 100 amp main breaker. The solar guys are saying we need an electrical panel rated for 200 amps so that we can put in the solar necessary to power the house. So these are the type of things that we're dealing with. But if anybody's interested in solar, I have a couple wonderful companies that I can recommend to you if you wish. Just send me an email, rob@Robart Electric. What else we got? Matthew. I just put in a lot. I had to change my pound to 200 with the one. There it is. with a 100 amp existing service. That is really, really common, changing out the electrical panels. Now, just briefly on that topic. Today, the city of Edmonton, and it's been the last 2 years, if you change any part of an electrical service, the complete service must be brought up to today's code. If you've got a 60s house or a 50s house and you want to upgrade to 200 amps or 100 amp, you can't just change the panel. The complete service, the outside stuff, everything must be converted over to today's code. All right, guys, there's so much more to understand and know about the electrical aspect of residential, whether it's services, panel changes, basements done without permits, all those sort of things. Please, if you've got any further questions, contact me, Rob at Robart Electric, and we can take a look at this for you. One more question just came up. As Rob just pointed out in an early talk, I go from 100 to 200. It will cost $20,000. That is not including the solar system. Yeah, that's typical. So it is very expensive, but obviously the payback is acceptable because there's lots and lots of people doing it. And EV, electric vehicle chargers, are becoming huge out there. We're putting in so many of those, but again, the load calculation must be done, and there's a very good chance your service needs to be upgraded, or we start using WAP Misers or similar devices to reduce the demand and load on the service. I hope everybody had a wonderful time. Thanks for spending time with me. Looks like I spent 48 minutes doing this, longer than I expected. But please, guys, get a hold of me, Rob at robartelectric.com, if you've got any further questions.